All right, welcome back, Trash Talkers. This week, may I dare say it, I think we got one of our best episodes yet. We saw tears, we saw raw emotion, we saw twinkly little lights, and there was only a minimal amount of drama. I'd say that's about the perfect formula for a great episode of The Bachelorette, wouldn't you, Nash?
I would, and I'd also add there was violence.
There was violence. There was a fair amount of violence. So, one question I think the episode left us with on that note of violence is, do we have a new villain?
Oh.
Well, we're going to get into that in this episode, but first we have some dates to talk about. So, first date we get is Blake's one-on-one. He's introduced to the men in the house and immediately goes on a one-on-one date with Katie. There was certainly some tension in the air, to say the least. I don't think any of the men were particularly thrilled to see him. I can imagine none of them in any circumstance would be happy to see Blake, let alone see him get that first one-on-one date. When that happened, my initial thought was Katie's going to test the waters with him right away, because if he's worth it and there's a connection, he's going to stay. But if there's going to be nothing there, why keep him around for longer than a day? You know, and that's exactly what she did. That's the direction she took. They went horseback riding on this date. Seemed to be a connection there, at least physically for sure. They seemed to have an emotional connection as well. We ended that date with a private country concert and a pretty serious conversation at dinner. Nash, do you think there's chemistry there, or do you think it's just physical attraction?
You know what? I think it has more to do with the physical attraction and probably that name, that clout that he's got already. You know, I think that has more to do with it than, let's say, the relationship that they both have with each other.
I mean, I don't know necessarily that I'd say Blake has any clout from his season. Because he seemed to be the heart eyes puppy dog following the lead around, and it didn't go anywhere for him in either situation. I don't know. I feel like there's the budding of a romance between the two. I think right now the driving force of it might be physical attraction, because I think they're both, from what we know of both contestants, very sex positive people. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean sex is the most important thing in your life, but it certainly does mean you're open to talk about it, explore it, things like that. So I think them going right into a bit of a physical relationship as much as they can in a horse field anyway, right off the bat, I think that's going to cloud a little bit of an emotional connection, but I don't think there's not an emotional connection there. I think an even bigger question that's going to arise and continue to be asked, and I think their initial spark is going to push this idea. A lot of people are going to question whether or not they talked more than just the simple DM message that they're both claiming was the only interaction. What do you think?
That's a good question. I'm not sure where to put that. That's a tough one. I think there probably was more. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. There was more. Yep, they're lying.
I think I'm going to agree with you, but not in an intense way. I think there was probably a little more than the exact details they gave us. However, I don't think they necessarily were pursuing a relationship prior to the show, or at least Katie probably wasn't. Obviously, Blake was smitten enough from whatever interaction they did have to pursue her and take the risk to come out to the show. But I'm not really sure that it was a double-sided betrayal, let's say, on the agreements of what it means to be a Bachelorette contestant. So I don't know that I completely believe them, but I'm not going to flat out say they're complete and total liars and this is a sham. I don't think it's that extreme, but I definitely think there must have been something more than a, hey, great job on your season. Oh, thank you, for them to take this risk and pursue this relationship and for him to stay and get the rose that day. So we'll see if anything comes out of that. I this question kind of gets asked every time there's almost an instant connection between a Bachelor and Bachelorette. Last Bachelorette season, everyone kind of assumed that Dale and Claire had talked prior to their filming. I think they flat out lied. I think that was a really aggressive lie on their part because within 3 episodes, she was engaged. And I feel like that's the extreme. This, I don't think, is that extreme. But I guess we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out exactly. He did end up getting a rose at the end of that date. So I think Blake's probably going to be in it for the long haul from this point forward. And I think he's going to put a target on his back with the guys, but I don't necessarily think it's going to backfire for him like it has for Carl and Thomas up to this point. I think he's going to be able to handle it. I don't know why I say that. Well, I think I'm going to go with he's going to be able to handle it because he's been in one of these houses before where he also put a target in his back in the sense the last time he was here because he was one of the few guys that defended Claire when everyone else was like, what's up with her and Dale? There's something going on. And he was like, no, there can't be. So he already is comfortable with going against the grain in a house and scenario like this. So I don't think he's going to back down to any of these guys.
I don't trust him.
I mean, I guess we'll see if you're right to not trust him.
I am right, I think, with 0 to little information.
No, that's usually how you function.
That's the best way to operate, ladies and gentlemen. Write that down. Keep it in your day planner. That one's for free.
Speaking of knowing nothing and not planning, let's talk about rugby basketball group date. First of all, I don't know who suggested this, and I don't know why every season there's an extremely violent sporting event. It just seems like a liability waiting to happen, and it seems like every year someone gets injured to a worse degree, and one of these days they're just going to cross a line. But until that happens, we have rugby basketball. Personally, I did play rugby for a little bit in college, so as a small person with existing injuries, I played rugby, and I can attest to the fact that it hurts. Like, this is not a game you should play if you're not at your physical peak. I lasted about 3 weeks and then was out for the remainder of one season simply because I got taken down and that was it. So I don't know why someone suggested that a bunch of men over 30, half of which have dad bods, play one of the most violent and physical games and expect it to go completely well. It's not a good sport for anybody to play. It's not a good sport to start off playing. Certainly not when the rules are half made up and there's no actual referees making sure things aren't going poorly. So, terrible date, in my personal opinion, for a lot of reasons. We did see Michael A. get taken down pretty harshly by Justin. And that, again, is another thing we see every single season. Somebody gets hurt playing these events, and all of a sudden, they have the Bachelor or Bachelorette's attention immediately. It's like, if you're competing in one of these sports, I don't care how aggressive or competitive you are. If you're gonna get that way, you have to know you're probably going to injure someone, and then all of the attention is going to be off you. It's going to be on the person that you hurt, and then you look like a dick, for lack of a better term. Weirdly enough, the only person acting like that was Hunter, who did not get called out for it by Katie. I was kind of expecting her to, because it seems like if you're going to show that much aggression with zero regard to anyone else, that's a little bit of a red flag. I think it's kind of more natural for men to be that way in this type of scenario than women, because as soon as he did it, everyone else stepped up to that level. Not a single person, I would say, save for a few moments, really kept it clean and polite. Once the boundary was set, all the guys stepped up to the plate and got just as aggressive during this game.
And honestly, because that's all women want to see is just men fight each other. And it's terrible. And I hate that that's the reality that we live in. But hey.
Yeah, because women are known to actually be football's biggest fans and WWE's biggest fan. We're known for craving the violence.
Yeah, they are. They're like, give me more violence.
So, I mean, this is really, now that I said what I just said, this is a male gaze date. And by that, I mean the female gaze dates. So we haven't talked about, it's a big subject that gets talked about a lot, is the female gaze versus the male gaze. And they're very, very different things. Again, this is my brief understanding of it with no professional background in explaining this, other than I've seen a lot of TikToks. So you have the female gaze, which is primarily interested in men who are emotional and can open up and are protective and loving and caring. And then you have the male gaze, which is the more sexually driven, physical gaze, which a big thing that people talk about right now is how men appeal to the male gaze for themselves and for each other more than they do to the female gaze. And so I'm comparing this date in the same way, where the only people impressed by a date like this is other men. Like, women really do not care. This date teaches you nothing except maybe who to look out for. But like I said, when you put a bunch of guys who have only been in a house with other men, sharing bedrooms and getting 2 minutes with the woman they're dating every week, there's going to be a lot of tension. There's going to be a lot of aggression. And once those floodgates open, you can't really shut them until the game's over. So this is a date for the men with each other. This was not a date for Katie. And it never is. They do it every season.
Nope, I think Katie got exactly what she wanted. Just pitting men against each other. It's all she ever wanted.
Well, she did want to date 30 men at the same time.
Exactly. She wanted the chaos, she wanted the smoke, and that's what she got.
So, weirdly enough, Hunter did get the date rose at the end of this date. I think we all kind of assumed it was going to go to Michael A, because he really took one for the team. He got his head smashed into the dirt, and Hunter got the rose. If I was Michael A, I would have been a little peeved with that. You don't almost get sent to the hospital to not get a rose at the end of the day, and yet the guy who set the bar for the aggression was the one who ended up getting it. I was very surprised by it.
That's just more to my point. Katie wanted the violence, and who should give it to? The guy that created the violence. I
think instead of that,
I think I'm right. I mean, hey, why'd she give it to him? Why?
I think it was because he showed pictures of his kids. I think that's why he got it. So I think that's the only reason he got it.
No.
I think she's rewarding the guys who are opening up and being personable and vulnerable and showing a picture of his kids and telling more of his story is a part of that. I think the game was honestly just a liability, and the only part of the night that mattered was the cocktail party.
They signed waivers. They can't sue.
Well, hey, listen, if the Bachelor series can pay off Chris Harrison 8 figures to not talk, I think they can take care of anything that these normal average guys could throw at them with a court-appointed lawyer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a software strategist. He could have gotten a good lawyer.
That's true, too. Better lawyer than I could have afforded, that's for sure. The other date we got last night was the one-on-one with Andrew S. I gotta say, I don't think Andrew S. is my favorite contestant. I think he's a really great guy. I personally like Michael A. a little bit more, although I think Andrew S. is a little bit further in my good graces than Greg is. He's been a fan favorite the whole season. But for this date alone, I think this is probably one of the cutest and most sincere dates, at least that I can ever remember seeing. Like, this seems like a date that you could pull off at home and it would have been just as special. Maybe, not a steak cooked dinner, but certainly everything else. So for the date alone, I think this won the night over for me. I don't know if Andrew S. has won me over, but big fan of the date.
Which date was this? Which one was this?
They started off walking into the woods.
Oh,
just
that
the
was the
two.
field with the lights. And
Yeah,
all
the field with the lights, which if I was Andrew S., I probably would have ran in the other direction. Like, yeah, let me just get led into the woods by this stranger that I've known for about 3 weeks who's also dating, everyone I'm living with. I totally feel safe and comfortable in this situation. But I don't know. I really do think it's the twinkly lights that got me ultimately.
It is. That I think I can say it as a fact. Chicks dig string lights hanging from trees. Yes, they do.
On that, you're right. On the previous arguments, I don't agree with you.
I'm also right. Thank you.
on this point, you're certainly right. Because that was my favorite part of the day. I mean, the room with all the the glowy balls with notes on them, that was kind of cool. It gave me those weird Instagram museum vibes. But the first part of the date where they had to pull the questions and, interact and talk with each other, I thought that was really, really cool. And I think a date like that is the perfect way to set up whether or not a couple has chemistry or not. And I definitely think these two do. I think they have a lot in common, and they're both extremely comfortable with each other already, despite this being their first one-on-one. Mm-hmm. So I think Andrew S., after this date, in Katie's eyes, really pushed himself up the ladder.
Yeah, no, I definitely think he did. I'll agree to that because he seemed to bring up, heavy topics that are genuinely concerning to him, as well as being able to absorb what she had to say. I think that's, that's pretty powerful. He definitely got bumped up in my book as well.
Speaking of heavy topics, talk about serious topics. They brought up kids. The possibility of them having kids and what that would mean.
And I thought it was weird how it wasn't even brought up in what's your interest? I felt like it was just brought up as when this happens, Well,
I think it was, relevant to what they were saying, talking about previous relationships, because at some point previous relationships always come up. And I guess I hadn't realized, maybe because of his age, I believe he's about 26 or so, Katie being 30. I feel like for a 26-year-old guy, it was very, very interesting to me that he had already had such a serious relationship where he was willing to go down on one knee, and what held him back from that was how they would have felt about having biracial children. So to me, that alone was kind of crazy, and I think it really speaks to his sincerity in being there and trying to pursue Katie, as well as his maturity. We got to see a little bit of that maturity earlier in the season with how he handled the whole situation with Trey and Thomas and navigated that. Because I still personally think, despite Thomas proving to be, a guy who needed to leave, I still think Andrew S. handled it the best for who Katie is as a person. I think a lot of other types of contestants would have preferred Trey's option, but I think because Katie's she's not a dunce, she, I think, is pretty perceptive to other people and what the situations are at hand. Granted, you're not going to know everything all the time, but I think eventually she would have figured Thomas out once she kind of took a step back from that physical attraction. He wasn't going to last long anyway. So I definitely think he's one of the more mature characters. I say characters. One of the more mature contestants on this show as of right now, considering his age. Because I think him and Aaron are very, very close in age. And I think they're total opposites in terms of maturity level.
That's a very good point to make, that comparison.
A lot of people are kind of already, they're picking their favorites. So at the top, we got Greg, Michael A., and now Andrew. And once people pick favorites, they obviously start to speculate who the next Bachelor is going to be. Because the next Bachelor, when they pull from a season, usually comes from, I would say, the top 5. Katie being chosen, I think, was purely because she erupted as a fan favorite so early on into the season for Matt James. And a lot of people are already kind of pointing towards Michael A. as the next Bachelor. I think, obviously not knowing who Katie ends up with at the end of this, I think if she doesn't end up with Michael A., I do not think he's going to be the Bachelor because he's not going to want to be the Bachelor for a few reasons. He's not going to want to take away more time from his son. I also don't see him as the type of guy that wants to date 30 women at the same time to see which one of them's his wife. I think he only wanted to risk it because of who Katie was, and that's why he went out of his comfort zone. I don't think he's going to opt in for being the Bachelor. After this episode, if Katie doesn't end up with Andrew S., I could very much see him being a potential Bachelor for next season.
I feel like Greg has probably got the good chops to be the next Bachelor.
See, I have a little bit of mixed feelings about Greg. Nothing too much against him. He seems like a sweet guy. But like I've been saying, I just don't think this type of environment is the best environment with him. We're seeing a lot of jealousy come from him. And I think it's going to get much more difficult for him as the season goes on. So those are some early predictions out of nowhere, but we still have the rose ceremony to talk about. A big thing I want to talk about, and it kind of took over the rest of this episode, was Hunter coming back off of getting the rose at this very aggressive date to being very aggressive with Katie's time, despite having a rose. Everyone's kind of pointing the finger at him being the next villain. I don't know if I'm ready to call him that. I think his ego has been growing in this environment. I think Katie's kind of fueling that ego. Because I don't know if you recall earlier in the season, I kind of said of Hunter that he's going to be a lot more into her than she's into him. She's going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt in that and keep him around to see if anything grows, but ultimately nothing's going to. I think that's still accurate. And I would say in pursuit of that, Katie is willing to give him this attention. She's probably been, building up his ego a little bit. I know there's a lot of scenes leading up to this that they've both kind of shared on social media that we haven't seen. Like they celebrated his anniversary of sobriety together, which is something we didn't see, which is certainly, a big moment. So
yeah.
When you add in those extra things that we haven't been seeing, I don't think Hunter's the new villain. I think this is a producer manipulation of how we're viewing him because he made himself an easy target by upping the aggression, not only in his actions, but in his language. And I think, again, that is a result of Katie making him feel safe and secure and happy, and his ego's being boosted. I think it's a combination of all of that. I don't think he's actually as bad of a guy as the producers would like us to think.
It's important to keep in mind for this because we do not see everything.
We don't see a lot. And I know very recently something that kind of sparked a lot of backlash from the contestants onto fans is after this week's episode, a lot of fans were being really, really harsh towards Hunter, especially his mannerisms. And something we don't see in the show get discussed, but that's being forced to have the discussion now, is he actually has a mild form of Tourette's. So, unbeknownst to all the fans, they've been making fun of him having Tourette's. And Katie came to defend him. The other guys have been supporting him. And that, more than anything, tells me this was production and not him. Because if you notice, Katie did not defend Thomas when he got kicked off. but she is defending these other guys when the fans are giving him a little bit of heat. So I think that says everything we need to know about whether or not he's actually a villain, because I think if he was, he wouldn't have friends in the house defending him, and he wouldn't have Katie defending him.
Mm-hmm. That's good points to make. Cash, you know so much about this.
I do manage our social media. Speaking of, if you don't follow us on social media, our Instagram is Trash Talk TV Podcast. You like that?
Yeah, that was a beautiful segue.
Wasn't it?
Great memes. For those who haven't checked it out, but you definitely should.
Definitely should. So
shameless plug.
That being said, still on the point of Hunter and the way production is cutting, I do think we should give the guys a little bit of credit. However, I don't think production edited Thomas and Carl poorly. Again, because Katie did not defend Thomas at all from anyone when, he got kicked off. If anything, she was more firm in how she felt about him and what she said that night. Carl, I don't think he was ever a villain. I think he was just kind of dense and a little too self-absorbed to realize how he was coming off. And I think that's just the type of guy he is. Nothing necessarily against him. Not a bad dude. Just a little in his own head. But it'll be interesting to see if Hunter goes home soon. It'll be interesting to see who gets cast as the next villain, per se. Because we usually do get to a point in these seasons where the production lets the romances build and we focus less on drama and more just on people's emotions, how they're feeling, because that brings natural drama. We're seeing it from Greg already with the jealousy. I don't think he's going to be the only guy to start to feel that way. I think we're going to see a lot of tension begin naturally just because the stakes are going to naturally rise for these guys. So it'll be interesting to see if Hunter goes home anytime soon. I'm not sure that he's going to. I mean, we got about 12 guys left after this rose ceremony. So I would say no one went home that I felt shouldn't have gone home this week. I think everyone who went home either went home because they didn't have a connection or they just kind of were there, But a few guys that I'm surprised have stuck around, and now let's segue into the love 'em or leave 'em portion of our show.
Let's do that, Emily. I think that'd be a great idea.
Thank you. I appreciate the support. So for me, the guys, these are on my leave list. They've been on my leave list just because I'm shocked that they're...
Oh my God.
It's nothing against them. I'm just shocked that they're still here because I feel like we've seen nothing substantial from either of them. It's Aaron and Brendan. I hate to continue to throw them under the bus week after week. I'm just not seeing it at all. I'm not seeing them having a connection to Katie. I'm not seeing Katie have a connection to them. I think Aaron's just a good commentator. Not that he's a good commentator. He's an entertaining commentator. He's very, very vocal and uses a lot of aggressive words, and I think that's why production's happy he's around. But I don't get Brendan. I feel like he's been on the screen for a total of 5 seconds. Again, there's stuff we're not seeing, but I feel like if it was substantial or important enough to their relationship, we'd see it. So they're on my leave list for the week, and obviously, I don't think it's going to surprise everyone. On my love list for the week is Andrew S.
Predictable as always.
Very predictable. I go for the safe bets, I think.
That's okay. So for my love 'em, I gotta bring back James because I think he made a big improvement this week by actually fighting for his time. And like you were making earlier, I think we've got a lot of guys that are just kind of there. I think, honestly, out of fear that other people in the house will get upset and trash talk them like they've done with all the other people. Trash talk TV, hello. Like they have done with Carl and Thomas, like they all sort of rallied against them. And I think a lot of them are sort of afraid by that. But here we saw James, Box Boy, whatever his last name is, actually try and get more time or time that he thought he earned because Hunter already had the rose. And I think, totally fine. Makes a lot of sense, and I love to see it. We got great athletes on the field this week. I'm gonna have to agree with you on the leave him for Aaron. Aaron, I just don't get. I don't get his thing. I don't understand him as a person. He just seems kind of like to make commentary on everything else. And he doesn't respect a lot of people whenever they do something. That's just disrespectful. So yeah, I'm gonna say drop him because I don't like that soundbite mainly.
Yeah, I am kind of tired of Aaron. Nothing against him. I just feel like he's not cut out for Katie and TV, personally. I feel like he's got a lot of growing up to do before he's ready to get down on one knee for anybody, let alone someone like Katie. Another thing we got at the end of this episode was our mid-season promo, which I think we should talk about. It looks like emotions are going to get high and the drama's going to go up, but the drama's going to go up because people are getting to the point now in this season where it's not just infatuation, it's not just lust, it's actually, we're in the progress of people falling in love, both Katie and the guys. So I think weirdly enough, we're going to start to see a lot of self-eliminations coming up because I think a lot of these guys are ultimately not going to be able to handle this type of environment for dating. And I'm going to attribute that to the fact that I think Katie got a lot of really, really genuine guys interested in her because I would say she's different than a lot of our previous bachelorettes in the sense that she's very outspoken. I would say she's headstrong and she's very confident. Not to say our previous bachelorettes haven't been those things, but I think our previous bachelorettes have been more afraid to push back on the producers, to push back on fan opinion, and to push back on the guys than Katie has been. And I feel like that drew out a very certain type of guy that is going to fall hard and fall fast. And I think that ultimately is going to be what does it for some of these guys. Specifically, the guys I'm thinking are going to self-eliminate. I'm going to call it for Mike P, for Michael A, and then for Greg. And I think they're going to leave in that order. For Mike P, I think
shots are being fired.
Yeah, I'm making some bold assumptions.
Oh my god.
For Mike P, I think what's ultimately going to do it is kind of what the obvious is that in terms of a physical relationship, they are just not on the same page and they don't value it the same. I don't think he's going to go as far as hometowns. And again, the contestants don't necessarily need to, not hometowns, I mean, fantasy suites. I don't think he's going to make it to fantasy suites anyway. But even if he did, I don't know, that's something where I feel like if you're a very sex positive person, you want to know that a physical connection and a physical intimacy can exist in marriage. Nothing against waiting till marriage for people who that's what they believe in. But I think for the majority of people, and especially somebody like Katie, they want that knowledge that the intimacy is there. And one of the ways to do that is through a physical relationship. And I feel like that's going to be a big roadblock for him. So,
wow, you really thought a lot about this.
And that's really an each his own type of scenario. It's nothing against Katie. It's nothing against Mike. They just want different things from what their relationship is going to be. Because again, the point of, if he's waiting till marriage, nothing wrong with that. But if they're going to get engaged, what does that mean? Get married in a month? Because, Katie's been very vocal about, even with her little mini date with Justin, where he was like, oh, would you rather live without sex for a year or live without music? And she was like, I'd rather live without music for a year. Like, I think someone like that, there's clear discrepancies between what each of them wants and expects in a relationship. And I think that's what's going to do it for them. For Michael A., I think what's ultimately going to push him over the edge is he's going to want to go home to his son. We saw in the promo, he gets to FaceTime with his son, and his son, being so young, thought, his dad just didn't want to see him. I think that's going to break his heart.
Oh my God.
And he's going to go home because he's going to want to be his son. And that's also why I don't think he would accept being the Bachelor, because that's another few months away from your kid. And I don't think he's going to do that. Not after doing it this first time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing you said for Mike P really probably rings the truest. Like, I think he's got the sort of setup and character to probably make it to the end, but I don't think that his life choices are going to match enough with him, with Katie.
And then for my last self-elimination, Greg, we're already seeing that this process is very hard for him. The more his feelings grow for Katie, the harder it's seeming to get. And I think it's going to hit a breaking point. And I think that breaking point is probably going to be fantasy suites.
Oh.
I think he's going to make it all the way to fantasy suites. Whether or not he calls it before he goes to his fantasy suite with Katie or after, I'm not super sure, but I definitely think he's going to make it that far. And I think that episode is probably going to be where we see him go away.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see if I'm right ultimately. I think those are pretty... I don't know. I thought a lot about this because I was watching that promo and I was surprised to see Mike P in so much of it, because I feel like other than that one date, we haven't really seen much between them. And then I started thinking about it, and this is what I came up with.
Well, we'll see. Well, I think we'll see. Those are definitely some good points to be made about all of them, regardless if they actually, leave or not, on their own self-determination.
Yeah. But I think that's going to be a real killer for Katie, is when guys self-eliminate. Because I think if you self-eliminate, especially if you're at a certain point, it's got to be a big, big reason. And I think it's probably going to impact her a lot and make this extremely, extremely hard for her, as well as for the guys. I don't think it's going to be an easy decision for any of them to leave. But I think at least these three, that's what we're going to see happen. All right, and with that, Trash Talkers, we're now at the halfway point of Katie's season, and at the end of our episode. Seems like things are going to start getting really serious from here on out, but until then, we'll just have to wait and see. That's a wrap.